Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. Today we have a show that is part of the Myth Warriors series, and this is our series, of course, where we are assertive and we are proactive. We are on offense. We are out there in the world and we are making things happen. What are we doing? We are testing. We are prodding. We are fighting. We are on the move to find out what potentially is a myth, a lie, a falsehood, a fraud in our lives, in our world, in our minds. And in the alternative, what's something that potentially could be accurate, maybe even a fact that we could use then to help us maximize the potential for us to surpass our goals. So that's our offensive warrior stance, out there trying to determine what's a myth and what's true. We're also on defense too. Got on our protective gear because warriors, we are offensive, but we also have to defend. We've got to protect ourselves from bad data, bad information, poor choices. Sometimes there's actual sabotage that's potentially out there where people and ideas and institutions are putting forth concepts that are myths, and we might not be aware of it. So that's what we're doing. So today we have a show episode topic that is trying to lean on someone who bends is futile. Trying to lean on someone who bends is futile. Trying to lean on someone who bends is futile. So when we look at this and we think, oh, okay, interesting. I have to, and I shared in the show notes, and of course I always encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com. We have started many wonderful, hopefully effective programs, and we would like you to be part of it. So come to CourtneyAnderson.com and reach out and share a little bit about your perspective and take part in what we're doing. So when you look at the show topic, often in the show notes you'll see that I do my best. Obviously, we're trying to figure out, what's a myth, what's an accurate fact. A lot of that, of course, is trying to figure out, is something credible, something, a credible source? Is it something potentially that I might want to investigate as being potentially truthful? And so I do we do lots of shows with different quotes, and we share things from people who are famous or infamous. We share things from people who are notable, and all different types of perspectives, historically, artistically, in terms of business or law or government or just anything, because we need ideas to begin to see what we're going to go out there and be a warrior against, or potentially for, right? If it's a myth, I'm against it because I know it's out there potentially doing harm to people. But if it turns out it's not a myth, it's a fact, or it could be a fact that's potentially probably more accurate than not accurate, then I want to open up. I want to let that into my world, into my thought process, into my mind. So the show topic, of course, as I said in the show notes, I have to say usually, because I was going to say I always, but there's probably going to be instances if I go back and we look through all of the different shows where I did not fully source something, or I was inaccurate with a source. So what I was saying is I do my best to try to show you where I'm getting information from. And sometimes we don't realize. We'll think of something and we'll think, oh, I thought of that, without going and doing a little bit of research to figure out, did you think of that, or is it something that you remembered, maybe that you read or heard somewhere else? So I do always conduct at least some basic research by going and taking the ideas and the terms and putting them into different search engines and looking to see, is that something that I really did just read or hear or remember before I move forward with the show. So that's all to say that in this show, our show topic, trying to lean on someone who bends is futile. The thing that's so interesting about this is when I looked at my show list and we were trying to put together, the shows, I looked at this and I thought, I like this idea, but where did I get that? Because I don't think that I just thought that up. And sure enough, what happened is I was reading a public internet forum, right? So what people say on internet sites, right? And I happened to be reading one about some of the medical sleep conditions. And that's where I saw this, and that's where I found it. I put the link in the show notes. So that's, to the best of my understanding, where I found it. I'm not saying that the source is credible. Internet forums and chat rooms typically aren't going to be the most credible sources to end an investigation, to find out if something is a myth, right? A falsehood, something that's fake, or if something is real. But it's a fine place to start. It's a good place to start. And you could start anywhere. Somebody could have told me something in a social event in real life, or I could have, heard something from a friend, or I could have read something on an internet chat room. None of that is a bad place to start a discussion, to start an investigation, because you get ideas and information from everywhere. That's just but we just don't want to end it there. And that's to get away from that thing where you and I have, I'm pretty sure everybody has experienced something in life where you're talking to somebody and it's like, and somebody's telling you something. They're like, I heard, that if you eat 4 tomatoes, then you'll grow 4 inches. And you'll ask them, okay, interesting, I hadn't heard that, but, how do you know? Like, how do you know that? And then they'll say something like, yeah, that's what my cousin told me. Like, period, in the story. Like, that's what my cousin said. That's what they said. It must be true. I'm going to go out and eat 4 tomatoes and see how much I grow. A lot of people in their analysis, in their investigation into whether or not something is credible or it's a myth, right there, they're like, that's what somebody told me. Or they'll say something even more generically than that. They'll say, that's what I heard. Right? They don't even tell you they heard it from their cousin. They just say, that's what I heard. That's what I heard. Okay, well, all right. I'm not saying whether or not you heard it. I'm not debating whether or not you actually heard it. What I'm saying is, what is it? Is it something that we should believe? Just saying that's what I heard is the beginning of the discussion. It's not the end of the discussion. But like I said, there are people, and I experience this more often than I expect, where people will say to me, they'll say something like, I gave you an example of just sort of something seemingly random. And then I'll try to follow up. Okay, that's interesting. Did you read some sort of scientific research? Is there some sort of thing that's come through that's showing this about the magic number of 4 tomatoes? What size tomato? How ripe should tomatoes be? Like, I want to ask all these questions, right? Because I love data. But a lot of people, I start trying to ask questions and they just cut you off. And they're like, look, or they cut me off, right? Maybe it's me. And they'll say, look, I told you what I heard. That's what I heard. And that's it. Like, they're ending the conversation. They're done. That's effective for ending a conversation. I don't know if it's effective for ensuring that we're getting good information and good data so we can make really good choices, so we can do everything in our power to potentially increase the probability that we're going to meet and surpass and sustain surpassing our goals, right? It's difficult to do that if I've got bad information. If it really is true that if I eat 4 tomatoes, I grow 4 inches, but they have to be a certain type of tomato. They have to have a certain, point in their of ripeness, and I eat the wrong type of tomato, I'm never going to get any inches, right? So you got to get the right information. So all that's to explain why, I'm going to go, and I do it all the time, right? I share things anecdotally. I share things that, quote, I've heard. I share things I think. They come to me in a dream, and I'm sharing something that I read on an internet chat forum. That's the beginning of the discussion. It's not the end. So let's look at the discussion. Let's look at the actual idea and see, that's what we're trying to figure out. Is there anything that might be factual about this, or is it totally just a lie and a myth? So the idea is trying to lean on someone who bends is futile. It's useless. It's pointless. So in the show notes, I put the definition of futile. Because a lot of times when we use words and people think, well, what does the word mean? I don't know. If you don't know what the word means, then obviously it's impossible for us to figure out what the idea means, and then it's impossible for us to begin to figure out, is it potentially true, because we don't even know what it means. If I said to you, "Berjugaha," and you said, what? And I said, "Berjugaha." Now, I just made that up. To the best of my knowledge, "Berjugaha." isn't any kind of word in English that I'm aware of. I've never actually heard that as a word in any language. Okay? I literally just made that noise. So if I go around making that noise, and I say to you, trying to lean on someone who bends is, how can we begin to figure out what that means? We don't have a clue because we don't know what means. Now, I just told you I made it up. You'd have to ask me. I could have made my own language, and that could be one of my new words in my new language. You'd have to ask me, then I'd be the source to try to figure out what on earth am I talking about. Since I am using mostly English, then I just go look and see what the dictionary says. If I'm using Spanish, I go look and see what the dictionary says so that we don't have to sit here and argue about something I'm telling you I made up imaginary words. It's hard to do it if it's something that there's no agreement on. If I'm just telling you that's an imaginary word I made up, then it becomes difficult for you to accept that my definition of it is accurate because I could be lying and making that up too. I could be tricking you. So we put the definition in, or part of the definition. So part of the definition is that if something's futile, it is having no result or effect. It's pointless or useless. It serves no useful purpose. It is completely ineffective. All right, so let's walk through this idea. And one of the things that intrigued me about this topic idea is that it makes sense even visually. Right? So let's say I'm standing somewhere. Here I'm standing. Oh, there's somebody right there. There's someone. Whoo, I need to lean. Maybe I'm not feeling well. Maybe, who knows? Maybe the heat or the cold is getting to me, but I just need to lean on someone right now. I feel like I'm about to fall down. This is about to be a problem. So I'm reaching out to lean on someone. I go and I'm leaning on this person next to me. I'm leaning on Cassandra. Cassandra is the person next to me. I'm leaning on Cassandra. Oh my gosh! I'm leaning on Cassandra and then Cassandra bends over and falls down herself. So what was the point? How useful was it for me to lean on Cassandra physically, like me standing and leaning on someone when they just themselves bent over? It wasn't useful at all. In fact, it was futile. It was pointless. I had no result or effect. I was trying to stop myself from falling, right? Prevent the bad outcome that I thought would happen because I was like, well, I need to lean on someone. But because I went to lean on someone who themselves had no ability to support me. Now it might be that I'm too large sized. It might be that Cassandra's too small sized. It may be that Cassandra actually doesn't want me to touch her at all. So when I go to lean on her, she sort of moves out of the way and does everything she can to sort of bend as quickly as possible so that I will fall. I don't know. Maybe Cassandra doesn't like me. Who knows? But by Cassandra not being willing and or able to support me, leaning on her, then it didn't do any good for me to lean on her because I still fell down. And so, like I said, this is interesting because to me it seems simpler sometimes. So a lot of the things we talk about or some people would argue, are very abstract. And some people would argue it's more difficult when something's abstract. So you just sort of imagine it, right? It's not tangibly in front of you. I think this, though, is a scenario, potentially, when we're trying to figure out, is that a myth? Is it a lie that when you try to lean on someone who bends, it's futile? Or is it potentially accurate? Is that potentially something that we could maybe say is pretty accurate? And I could use that as a positive data point as I try to make good decisions in my life. So let's keep moving and looking. One of the things that I said was, to me, helpful is that this could be, physically, visually. You can see it, right? It's also something that applies not just in that physical sense, but it also would apply emotionally and psychologically, right? So let's say something horrible has happened in my world, whatever that world may be. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm overwhelmed. I have anxiety. I'm frightened. I'm sad. I sure wish I could have somebody to lean on emotionally, right? If I reach out and it's going to sound old-fashioned for some people, but if I called, or even more old-fashioned, I guess, spent time with, so maybe it was someone that lives in my own home that I just sort of walked over to where they are, or maybe it was someone that lives somewhere different and I just went to where they are, or I asked them to come to where I am. And I started telling them, oh, I'm so sad, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so scared, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, and I was sharing all my feelings. When we're doing that, when we're sharing all those feelings, and in these types of instances, what we're doing is we're looking for support. We're not looking for someone to say, oh my goodness, how horrible, they diagnosed your pet cat with this horrible, potentially fatal disease. You're not asking that person to come and magically take away what the veterinarian has diagnosed for your pet cat. What you're doing is, at some levels, asking them just to be with you, to let them shoulder and help carry you emotionally so that you can unload, right? So when we're trying to physically, I said, I'm imaginary Cassandra and I was going to try to lean. I'm trying to unload my own sort of burden of my body by leaning on somebody else. And hopefully I can sort of lean there until I can either get my own energy and strength back so then I can go stand on my own. I'm just trying to take some of the weight off of myself, right? Literally, in my example where it's me standing, or even seated, and I'm leaning and I'm slumping in a seated position on Cassandra. But it's the same thing in general emotionally. Something horrible has happened. Someone's cat has been, their pet cat has been given a horrible, potentially horrible, we don't know, diagnosis, or could be something negative that happens, or it could be addressed medically and the cat could continue on. Fine, we don't know yet. That person doesn't expect whoever it is that calls or sits with them to say, oh, it's okay, I'm going to go down to that veterinarian office and tell them they're idiots, and I'll run my own veterinary test, and I'll tell you what's wrong with your cat, and then I'll fix it. Unless, of course, that person that they called was some, the most, well-known, elaborately trained, cat specialist for that illness. And I'm not talking about that, right? We're talking about generically. If they were an expert, of course, then you would have called them, but you wouldn't be calling them to lean on them. You'd be calling them actually for their expertise to help solve the problem. I'm trying to take some of the weight off, and I'm trying to take some of the emotional and psychological weight off. My fear, my apprehension, my doubt, all of that, my anxiety. And one of the ways that we take that off, take that weight off, is by putting it out there and having somebody else help us with it. It's just, just imagine I'm leaning on my feet physically. I'm literally taking the weight off of myself totally and helping somebody else distribute it so they can carry some of my burden. And then I'm able to keep moving, right? Eventually, not at the moment. I'm leaning on them because I need them to help hold me up. Emotionally, it's the same thing. If I go to somebody and I'm sharing my pain, my fear, my insecurity, my anxiety, then I'm asking them to just take some of that weight off of me. How do people do that? They listen. They care enough. How about this? They answer the phone when I call. And to be very modern about it, because I kept saying it sounded maybe a little old-fashioned, a lot of people in the same place, right, the same household, they call each other. Worse, they don't even do that. They text, right? And people don't even answer. Like the person's in the same place, or maybe they're your family member or your roommate or whatever, or your best friend, and they don't even answer your own, text. They don't answer your own phone. They're right there. They just don't want to do it because they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to deal with you. That's what people will say. If someone is not willing to support me and I'm trying to take my weight off so that I can lean on them, then if they're not going to support me, they're just going to go ahead and bend, right? Just bend and let me fall. Now, when I'm calling on the phone and I really want to have someone to talk to, right? Or I want to sit with someone and talk to them. Their bending isn't necessarily going to be physically where they bend and I fall down, but I'm here trying, I want to tell you what happened. I'm so scared. That's what the vet said. What they're going to do is they're going to bend. They're going to bend away from me. They're not going to answer the call. They're not going to answer the text. If I come to their house, they're not going to answer the door. They're going to cut me off when I start talking, crying, and they're going to say, you know what? All you do is talk about the cat. That cat's old. What's the big deal? Really? Seriously? Who cares about the cat? It's just a cat. Maybe they'll redirect to themselves and they'll say, you know what? I don't really feel anything for you. The stupid cat. The cat one time looked crazy and mean. I think it also tried to scratch me, even though it didn't, but I think it wanted to. I don't even like cats. I'm allergic. And what about me? What about what happened to me? What about what happened to me with my job? What about what happened to me when I fell down and my leg hurts? What about me? All of this is the person bending away from you. So they're not standing there, sitting there, emotionally there, psychologically there, saying, give me some of your weight. I'm going to carry it with you. What they're doing is saying, I'm bending away. I'm bending. I'm not going to carry this. And they may do it with words where they redirect back to themselves and they're saying, I'm not at all carrying any of your weight. I'm talking about myself. Or they might bend with their actions. They don't respond to your phone call. They don't respond to your text message. They just ignore you. They've totally bent away. It's a very cruel way that people do this. So let's go through the facts, potentially. Input, I need to lean on someone. I'm going to try to lean on someone. That's part of what the first part of this is. The second part is this person that I'm trying to lean on is bending. Now, they may be physically bending down. They may be verbally, emotionally bending away, closed off, whatever. But they're not taking that weight. If I'm trying to lean on someone who bends, is that useless? Is it totally futile? Is it a waste of my time? I think in our physical analysis example, right? Right. So I'm trying to lean on Cassandra. Oops, Cassandra bent down. Whoops, I fell. I'm trying to lean emotionally, psychologically on people. I'm text messaging. I'm for me, I don't really do that, but I would call. I would sit with them. What am I asking? I'm asking them emotionally, psychologically, be with me here in this moment and help me unload this burden from my mind, from my heart. Share it with me. Listen to me. Let me talk about this. Ask me questions about it. By doing that, it does lift some of the weight off of me. But if I go to that person and again, they bend away, they bend, down, right? They're not going to pick up and carry that weight. They're not going to sit and let me unload some of that pain and fear and apprehension about my pet cat. They're not going to do it. They're going to change the subject. They're not going to answer my call to begin with. When they do talk, they're going to look at me and say things like, I don't understand why you're so sensitive. It's cat's old. Who really cares? All of this is bending away from picking up some of my weight. Picking up the weight would require them to physically, in that space, be with me. I can discern. Human to human, we can tell. Is somebody listening to me? Are they eyes looking over there? Are their eyes closed? Are they looking on their smartphone? Are they looking at some other person? I can tell. I can tell in your voice if you're taking some of my weight, sharing some of that pain, sharing some of the anxiety. Not that I want the person to collapse, emotionally, hysterically. Oh no, I love your cat too. I can't believe this. What are we going to do? So that we're both in such a distress that neither of us can lean on anybody. What I'm trying to do is get someone to help lighten my burden a little bit, but not be so destroyed that they just bend and they're completely useless, right? That's another example of them bending away from carrying the weight. So if I'm coming to them saying, hey, this is what the vet said, I'm a little scared, and they immediately, oh my gosh, not pet cat! I love pet cat! Oh! And they start crying and screaming. Then again, it's all about them, right? They're not taking any of my weight off. Now they're giving me more of their weight. All of this is to go back to our central question of this episode and show. Is it a myth? Is it a lie that if I try to lean on someone who bends, that's a futile, pointless, useless thing to do? Is that a lie or is that potentially true? It's potentially true. It's not a lie. We looked at what happens if I physically try to lean on someone and they bend and they won't accept the weight. We talked about what happens emotionally or psychologically when I need, in my mind, ideally, somebody to help me with this. And nobody will even open up accessibility, by, oh, I'm available by text. Or, they don't answer my call. They ignore my knocking on their door. I asked them to come to my door and they refused to, whatever. They're not going to take that way. They're bending. Some people bend the other direction, right? Where they take so much weight that they become useless, right? Oh my gosh, not pet cat! And they're crying and they're in the fetal position on the floor. They're sobbing, they're hyperventilating. Then all of a sudden, I'm in the position. I needed you to take my weight, right? I needed to lean on you. And now, because you're crying and hyperventilating and hysterical and saying that you think you're having a heart attack, now I'm the one like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Now I'm not getting any of the weight off, and now I'm carrying the weight I was already carrying. Plus, now you're trying to give me your weight. Oh. When I like I said, when I went back through the notes, and I have idea pads everywhere. Literally, some are on tablets, and some are on smartphones, and some are still jotted down on the back of a note or somewhere, whatever, with a pen. I mean, I'm constantly trying to gather ideas that I think, that's either interesting or maybe that's something to look at. And so when I looked at this initially, and the first time I read this quote, trying to lean on someone who bends is futile, I thought, yeah, I agree. And what I also liked about this, my assertion being that it is not a myth, it is a potential truth, You have to continue on with, when I say potential, I mean, I'm not going to tell you 100% what the answer is for all of mankind for all of eternity. I'm telling you what my perception is at this time. You're going to have to carry the rest of this and go on your own investigation and see what you think, what would apply to your life. But I know that one of the things I found to be really positive about this idea not being a myth and being accurate is it puts the onus on the person who's doing the leaning. In other words, there's so many times in life, and certainly in our professional lives, right? And all the work I do. So where I'm doing, especially one-on-one work. So one-on-one coaching and mentoring, professional development. And somebody will talk to me and they're telling me about what a horrible boss they have. This boss is the most horrible person in the world. They're so horrible. They're so horrible. Okay, all right. I'm listening. I'm of course being really specific. So we're walking through. What do you mean by horrible? Give me an example. Let's walk through what happened, what the outcome was, how we could, what factors potentially we can change in the future to try to improve getting better outcomes, so we can get you to a point where you're surpassing your goals. All right. So I'm doing that, and then the person says to me, "Oh." A month later, they say, you know what, oh my gosh, something really, I was worried about, maybe that I'd made an error and messed up something on the work project. And so I went to my boss and I just shared with them my feelings. I was really scared, that maybe I'd messed up. And then that my boss was so mean to me and my boss did this horrible thing to me. And then my boss used that against me and went and told, the division director that I didn't know what I'm doing and I'm an idiot. Now I would go back and say to you, and I would use this episode topic as making the assertion that it could be accurate and say, look, you tried to lean on someone who bends, and here's the deal. You knew they bent. So instead of this thing where woe is me, I'm the victim, all these horrible things happen to me, nobody helps me, nobody ever listens to me, nobody cares about me, I can't believe all these people that do all these horrible things to me, nobody's there for me. This goes on and on. It goes on and on at work. It goes on and on in our personal lives. It's one, in my mind, sort of continuous narrative where the person acts as if they're a victim and they don't have any power. If you go to someone who bends, and we just went over the fact, I'm making the argument, that if they bend, then they're not going to carry any of your weight. So it's useless, it's futile for you to go over there and try to put your weight off on them because they're not going to pick it up. They're not going to do it. You know this because they bend away, right? So if you looked at this idea from that perspective, it takes the power and it makes it's not a victim situation where, oh, this horrible person is doing these horrible things to me. It takes it instead to, okay, I need to lean on someone, or I feel like I need to lean on someone. If I pick somebody who I know bends and I know that's useless, then that's on me. I made that bad decision. So I'm going to get a horrible outcome. And I can't complain because that's exactly what I knew would happen. Because those people, that person has shown that that's what they do is bend. Now, of course, when I talk about this idea, which the number one question I get from people who are totally diametrically opposed to my assertion and conclusion, they'll say to me, yeah, okay, what? But how do we know who will bend and who will hold us, right? The idea is that, okay, don't try to lean on that person if you know they're going to bend because it's going to be, futile and useless. The thing is, how am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to know who's going to bend and who's going to hold us? Okay, how do you know? The answer is, what did they do before? Now, if you tell me this, you just met this person, they're brand new. They're brand new at your work. They're brand new in your town. They've just married into your family. They just moved into the house next door. You just met them at the grocery store 4 minutes ago, and you say to me, I don't know what they did because I've never tried to lean on them before. Okay, well, then let's start talking about this. How long have you known them? Is it appropriate for you, for someone you've known for 4 minutes, to now go to them with some very heavy weight you're trying to ask them to take that burden off your shoulders? And we try to work backwards from there to try to make sure we're getting to a point where we're making healthy choices before we just start going around to everybody, trying to lean on everybody. And I've seen some of this. I've been out socially somewhere at a store or market or, and somebody starts talking to me while we're waiting, in line. And they start telling me all their burdens. Oh, this horrible thing just happened. I couldn't believe this happened to my grandchild. And then, I had this surgery. And literally like 60 seconds ago, I met you. How much of that can I take? I can't. We all have limits. There are times when every single one of us, we're going to be the one who bends. I am saying it here. I've said it before. I cannot shoulder and carry the weight of the world. Trying to do so even a lot of people who have the best intentions, it leads to very bad outcomes. We all have limits, emotional, psychological, physical limits. I can only carry physically so much. I can only emotionally carry so much. And I have to leave enough room for me to be healthy and for me to also unplug and have time of just sort of relaxation, low stress time. So I bend. People ask for me to do things or to quote help sometimes, and it's too much. Sometimes it's really unrealistic. And sometimes it's a thing where I just met somebody in line at a store like 60 seconds ago. Now I can offer a nice smile, in line. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I can do that. But there's limits. So it's no party in this is the villain, and no party in this is the victim. There are times, based on the relationship, based on what's happening in our own lives, based on our own limits, based on being healthy, that we have to be the one who bends away and says, I can't pick up your weight and mine and everything else I'm carrying. I just can't, because it could lead to my destruction. And we see this. We see this people a lot of times who volunteer and do so much, and they get so emotionally overwrought and physically overwrought because the problems are immense they're trying to fix. And they just feel at some point they can't carry anymore, because you really at some point can't. You have to sleep, you have to eat, your own hydration, your own nutrition, your own joy that you've got to find somewhere where you're interjecting that in your life. You just can't give. And by giving, you're carrying, because at some point it's just too much. Even the strongest person, we can imagine a big, strong person, right? One of these women who's in the Olympics, and she's big, strong, but there's a weight limit. Her organism, no matter how elitely, how elite she is in terms of her muscle definition and what she's done, there's still a limit for all of us. So you're not a villain when you bend. You're not a villain when you try to lean on someone. What I'm saying is, what you're doing is making healthy choices. Sometimes the healthy choice is, I have to bend. I just met you in line. I can't stand here and solve everything or take all this weight. Sometimes you got to take responsibility. You cannot go pick somebody who bends. How do you know it? Because they did it before. So it's not somebody you met 4 minutes ago. It is not somebody who you just came to your workplace, yesterday. Now, I don't know why you go to somebody. Again, I said it's a whole different challenge working through why you're going to somebody that you don't really know, that you've only encountered, for 20 minutes or 2 days, and trying to unload your weight on them. That's a different part of the problem. But if you are doing what most people do, you're going to the same well you've gone to before. You're going to the same person you've gone to before, right? When you're trying to get your weight and somebody to help you carry it. And you go to that same person, and it was that same horrible boss that you told me all about in all of our prior coaching sessions. And now you want to come to me and tell me that you can't believe they betrayed your confidence. I sometimes, honestly, I do. I let out, and it's not intentionally to be cruel, but I laugh. You've got to be joking. That's what they've been doing. That's what you've been complaining about and telling me about. And are you serious? You see this so often with personal relationships. Somebody will tell you about their friend, and they'll complain about the friend. They'll say these horrible things about the friend. They'll say the person let them down. Say the person is the most horrible person in the world. And then they'll turn around and tell you next time you see them, again, a new story. They went to that same person who did all these horrible things before and showed, and that person is a horrible friend and blah, blah, blah. This. Well, you already knew that they've been. You see it in people's romantic entanglements and enmeshments. Sometimes they're very self-destructive and destructive to other people. Right? Oh, he did this, she did that. I can't believe they did that. And then you're the outside listener, and you said and you'll say to them, but we already knew this. What did they do last time? They did the same thing. They bent. So they were going to bend again. Now, was it possible that they could have not bent? Sure. I have another show. We have whole other programs. We're creating entire curriculum courses around separating what's possible, which is anything is possible, from what's probable, which is most likely what's going to happen. It's most likely if they bent last time, they're going to bend again. So don't go to them to lean on. And I often get people say when I have these types of discussions, especially with audiences, right? So keynotes and larger educational programs, and someone who doesn't agree with me, which is great. I mean, I'm not saying that this is quote the answer, right? I do everything I can to try to explain why I'm coming up with the reasoning I am, and put it in your hands to make your own decisions. But people will say to me, well, if I didn't have anybody to lean on, because everybody, all my relatives and these so-called friends and everybody at this stupid job, they're horrible. So if I know that they didn't, they bent last time and you tell me don't go to them again, who do I go to? I'm all alone. Okay, then the reality is that you may not have anybody that you know right now that you can lean on that's going to actually pick up the weight and not bend. What that means is then don't give the weight to anybody. You're going to have to give it to. You're going to have to take it off of your shoulders and deal with it as by yourself. And it may be that you're going to have to cut back on stuff. You're going to have to look at your time, look at your health. You're going to have to use the magic word no that we talk about all the time. You have to start telling other people, hey, I can't do that or I can't do this. And you may be the only one you can lean on. And you may have to take some of the weight and just go to sometimes I go to a happy place. Of course, in my happiest place in my universe is, wherever I live, right? My room. Because I created it to be happy. It's my happy place. I may have to go there and just watch mindless, cartoons or something and take some of that weight off. But I can't sit here and go through the same pattern going to people who've been and then having hysterically, new anger stories about how horrible they are. No, they're not. They did the exact same thing they did last time. That's on you. You shouldn't have done that. You chose that. Like I said, I think this is a very empowering and positive non-myth. All right, it's not a lie. I'm going to argue it's pretty accurate. And in closing, when I was thinking about this and working through show notes, I thought, okay, well, what's the opposite idea of this, right? You go to somebody to lean on them, and they're like, I'm not taking that weight. I'm going to bend away from that weight, whatever. And then it came to me, right, that it's I don't remember. I can't actually where first I heard of it, but it was a song. It's come out in many different time periods. But the lyrics, right? He's not heavy. He's my brother, right? So in the show notes, I went and I was like, where did that come from? And so I went, did a little bit of cursory research, and it looks like the nonprofit Boys Town has a nice little write-up about how in 1918 this was basically what we would call foster home or orphanage. And there was a child in 1918, according to their story that I have a link in the show notes, at this nonprofit called Boys Town. So in 1918, in the United States, there was these young boys had been abandoned. One boy had polio and he had heavy leg braces at that time. That's what was done in many instances to deal with someone who had polio. And walking was difficult for him, especially when he would try to go up or down steps. If you go look on the show notes, go to the link, you'll see the nonprofit has this little narrative, which I found to be uplifting. So the story that it shares is that the young boy that has polio with these heavy leg braces, it's very difficult going up down the stairs. And then it says that several of the homes, this is the foster home or orphanage, older children soon started carrying this boy up and down the stairs. And so it says that one of the adults there came to the children and said, is it hard carrying this other little boy that has polio up and down the stairs? And the little boy says, he ain't heavy, father. He's my brother. See, I think that's a beautiful sentiment. It's the opposite. It's the person who does. When you lean, they carry. See, I'm choking up. Look how emotional this is. And of course, it's been in song lyrics. It's been in other pop culture. It was even in the show notes of this nonprofit. They're talking about how years after this anecdote, that it was in a magazine. This idea. There was the same kind of quote idea, right? He's not heavy. He's my brother. And I think it's to end here on a very positive note. Yes, are there many people in life that we'll go to lean on, and they're not going to accept our weight? Absolutely true. They're going to bend. Are there times people are going to come to us and ask and need and desire for us to take their weight and we're going to bend? Yes. And if you tell me that you've never in your life bent and you just everything anybody ever comes to you with, emotionally, psychologically, financially, physically, you just carry all of it, then you're not being honest. And if you are doing that, you're making very poor choices for your health in terms of balance and burnout and things of that nature. But instead of focusing on this from a negative, again, I find it very empowering. We're going to prevent 95% of problems by not ever going back to somebody who's bent previously and asking them to carry weight, because we know that there's a high probability they will not do that. By not asking them, we don't put them in that position of having to feel, anything negative. And we don't waste our time going to some well, and I'm using, well to get water, going there and it's dry. I can't get what I need from them. How do I know that? Because they couldn't before. Stop going to them. On the other hand, this really, I think, touching anecdote and the idea people do step up and carry even little kids at an orphanage, strangers. People do this all the time. People bond a lot in groups and organizations. We'll see this, right? And the idea that in this anecdote that the little boy at the orphanage says he's my brother. Well, of course he's not genetically his brother. They're all orphans from different places. But what he was saying was, I chose to step up. I see him as close enough, and I'm using the idea of family in a positive, healthy way. I'll carry him, and physically, literally was. I find again, I'm choking up here. It's a beautiful sentiment. So don't wallow in some sort of negative, like, oh yeah, I can't lean on anybody. All they do is bend. Everything's futile. I have to give up on life. It's all wasteless and waste and pointless. No, not at all. If there isn't anyone right now in your world, then you need to lean on yourself I have lots of different programs on how to do that. Lots of different ways to find that space, to relax, to start taking things off your plate. And the other thing you need to do then is when you're at a more stable place, you need to go out and start meeting new people who potentially at some point in your life, hopefully, there'll be some times where there will be some people. It may not be your entire life, but you need to understand that there are instances that are real, true, when people do step up and they will carry your weight and they'll do everything they can to carry you all the way, right? So remember that. Take the responsibility to broaden your connections in your world so that you can begin potentially to bring someone in who could potentially carry some of the weight. And in the interim, you need to start carrying it yourself. And the other thing that I'm begging you to do is don't you ever go back to someone who bent and try to lean on them again, because we have gone over this. You're not going to get any different outcome. And then for you to then cry or scream or be angry or hurt doesn't make any sense. You already know what they're going to do because they did it. They're going to do it again. Would it be great if they stopped doing that for you? Yeah. Might it be something for them where it's too much? Potentially. You can't make other people carry your weight. The only person who's going to carry your weight that has to is you. I found this to be uplifting and positive. I found it to be touching. Vision of the little boys carrying the little boy polio. So get out there. Again, create that life where you're going to surpass your goals, and you've got to think about your actions. Stop leaning on things that are broken. I want to thank you. As always, my heart is full of gratitude that you joined me, and I do encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com. We're putting together a lot of resources, and if you share your feedback, ideas, email, get involved. Thank you for being part of today.